Hello and welcome to the Dr. Paula Show. This episode is about how can I create my own happiness? How can I be happy and optimistic when all around me there is such chaos and conflict? And that's the question that I'm going to answer today. So I love this question. I always start all of my shows with a quote, and today I'd like to start the show with a wonderful quote by a dear friend of mine, Marianne Williamson. This is a famous quote now, and many know it, and I'd love to remind you of it. It's just so beautiful. She said, "We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you." She said, "We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we're unconsciously giving other people permission to do the same." Close quote. And that again is by Marianne Williamson. I am honored to be a sweet friend of hers for many, many years. What a glorious thought. What a wonderful way to start this episode about creating your own happiness, no matter what's happening around you, no matter who's trying to bring you down. And how can we be happy when there's so much conflict, so much chaos and turmoil all around us? My dear friends, I have solutions for women. I love that I have the opportunity to share some things with you today. It all comes down to the question, or it begins, I should say, with a question: how badly do you want to be that light for others? How badly do you want to be an example of joyfulness for others who are in your circle of influence? And that reminds me of that story of the young man who came to Socrates and he said, "Socrates, I want your wisdom. I want your knowledge. I want to know what you know." And he said, "Very well, come with me." And he took the young man down to a nearby pond and put his head under the water for a long time. And we pulled him up, the kids just saying, "Oh my gosh, Socrates, why did you do that?" And Socrates said, "When your head was under the water, what did you want most in all the world?" "I wanted air," the young man said. "I wanted air." And he looked that young man in the eyes and he said, "When you want wisdom and knowledge as badly as you wanted air, you'll find a way to get it." And my sweet friends, what I'd like to suggest today in this topic of how do we remain happy and optimistic no matter what's happening around us, no matter who's trying to bring us down, that it's a matter of choice. Again, a matter of choice. Choice is our superpower, right? We can choose our thoughts, our words, our actions every minute of every day. And that's great news. So I'd like to share with you now some wonderful ways to create your own happiness, no matter what's happening around you and no matter who's trying to bring you down. I have this on video, some other places, but I wanted to share this with you because it is the answer to the question that I receive. How can I be happy when so many bad things are happening? And I love that question. So there are several ways, and I'd like to remind you of that quote. Well, you may have not heard it, but it's a U.S. President, Abraham Lincoln, said, "Folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be." Again, about choice, right? And there's so much research on this. Years and years ago at Stanford University, that's in California in the United States, there was a large study done. And this was the conclusion of this study. Over 2,000 people over a long period of time were questioned and then watched and responded. And here's the result. It says happy people and unhappy people. No, it starts like this, excuse me. Happy people do not experience one success after another, and unhappy people one failure after another. Instead, The survey showed that happy and unhappy people tend to have had very similar life experiences. The difference is that the average unhappy person spends more than twice as much time thinking about unpleasant events in their lives. And I'd like to add just unpleasant events, right? And the average happy person tends to seek, that's an action verb, and rely upon information that brightens their personal outlook, close quote. So, my friends, let me ask you this question. What are you doing to seek things that will brighten your personal outlook? Certainly watching, in my opinion, this is opinion by Dr. Paula, watching hours and hours and hours of the news is not something that's going to help you brighten your personal outlook. Yes, we need to know what's going on in the world. I absolutely do. And I do plug in and find out what's happening worldwide. It's my responsibility, I believe, as a global mentor for women. However, to seek, what are you seeking that brightens your personal outlook? Books. I have probably over 2,000 books in my house now. And the last time when we moved, I gave away 35 boxes of books. I love reading. I love learning. And I invite you, and I'm sure, this is a loving reminder because you probably already do this. Play beautiful, uplifting music in your home. Have art on your walls that lifts and inspires. And then connect with people who are optimistic. Yes. And sometimes you might think, well, even in my own family, I've got some human porcupines. Well, we all do, right? There are people in our family that, we love. However, they could be people who don't always lift us. And so find the people and spend time with people who lift you, from whom you learn life lessons, even through their examples. All right, let's talk about some ways to create your own happiness, no matter what's happening in the world, all right? And the first one I believe is the most important. Think gratitude. Focus on what you have and not on what you don't have. Whatever you focus on pulls you in that direction. We know that. And so think about the things that you have. Sometimes I'll stand at the sink when I turn on the water and just think about my dear ones in so many of the 55 African nations who they can't just turn on a tap. And they have to go out and find water other ways. And it's a precious commodity. And I just think we are so blessed, all those who have a roof over their head, enough to eat, clothes, and dear friends, and all the things. Be grateful. Have gratitude for what you have. Focus on what you have. And yes, we're always trying to improve ourselves, and many of us strive to have more so we can give more. And that's probably you also. However, I want to invite you that this is to realize that this is the most important way that you can create your own happiness. Yes, Dale Carnegie said, happiness doesn't depend on outer conditions. It depends on inner conditions. It isn't what you have or who you're with or what you do that makes you happy or unhappy. It's what you think about. For example, two people could be in the same place at the same time doing the same thing, and one is miserable and one is happy. Why? Because of a different mental attitude. And this is what we're talking about. So much of what creates our own happiness starts with our thoughts, our words, our actions. Absolutely. So I learned about gratitude in a very dramatic way. I was blessed to be able to represent the United States at NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium, many years ago. And we were all to report what we had done the year before to strengthen the families in our nations. Well, that year I had created a 55-minute parenting video and also wrote the book Solutions for Families. And every one of the women in the different countries stood and expressed shared what they had done. But the one who shifted my DNA around gratitude, I'd like to share that she was from Mali. This is in Africa. And she was the last one to speak. And she stood up in her beautiful, she had a gold headdress and a gold outfit that she had worn all 3 days of the conference, and her beautiful black face. And she stood there and she looked at us, and tears started streaming down her face. And she said, I don't do the fancy things that you do in your countries. You see, in my village, there's open sewage that runs down the middle of my village. And I later learned that the women in her village had gotten together and saved their money and bought the bolt of material and then sewed her outfit to represent Molly. And this beautiful woman said, we live in lean-tos and huts and in caves. We don't live in houses in my village. And she said, each morning, some of my friends and I, we take our shovels and we go to the different families in the village and find out who had died the night before from AIDS. And then she shared with us, she said, if it's the second parent, then we of course, they buried them and then they raised their children. And she said this sentence, which changed me forever. She said this: I'm currently raising 25 children in my cave. Not her children. No running water. No electricity. No husband. And she was raising those children. Gratitude. Being so grateful for what we have. The second way that we can create our own happiness, no matter what's happening around us, is to offer love and kindness. Be an example of loving kindness. I love this quote. Mother Teresa said, and I ended my first episode with this quote. Mother Teresa, who's one of my heroes, she said, spread love wherever you go. First of all, in your own home, give love to your husband, your wife, your children, your next door neighbor. Here's my favorite line and my favorite quote. She said, let no one ever come to you without leaving better and happier. Be the living expression of God's kindness. Kindness in your face, kindness in your smile, kindness in your warm greeting, close quote. That's Mother Teresa. Let no one ever come to you without leaving better and happier. Do you think if that is our focus, my friends, that we will be able to be lights unto others, to be able to create our own happiness and help others create happiness, no matter what's happening around us? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want you to know that these reminders, because that's what they are, loving reminders to you, they're for me also. I'm far from where I need to be. And I love sharing these principles because as you teach, you learn always. I do. And the third way to create your own happiness, and I love this one, is to be flexible and cheerful. Your ability to just not sweat the small stuff is an indication of your strength of character. Don't sweat the small stuff. And most of it is small stuff. I see so many worried women. And I think, oh, yes, I want you to be concerned about what's happening so that you can better serve others. And yet, gosh, let's not magnify things that are little. Let's not make them bigger. So I love this, being cheerful. It reminds me of this story. This is a true story, and I love telling this one. It happened on the Golden Gate Bridge, which is in San Francisco, and a man was in his car, and he was, coming up to the toll booth. And he looked and he saw this kid in the toll booth just dancing away, just rocking out. And he heard the music and he thought, what in the world is going on? And pretty soon it was his turn. And he rolled down his window and he said, what are you doing? And the kid says, I'm having a party. I said, what are you talking? He said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, what do they look like to you? Look at those other toll booths. And the gentleman looked at the other toll booths and he said, well, they look like people in toll booths. And he said, well, to me, they look like people in vertical coffins. And they kind of did. They just meaningless go through the motion of their job all day long. And then, like Lazarus rising from the dead, they leave their toll booth and they go home every night. And the man thought, oh my gosh, here is a kid with a philosophy about his job in a toll booth. And he said, so what makes the difference for you? And then the kid says, I don't know why people think I have a boring job. Hey, half the Western world comes and visits here every year to San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge. And he said, and each morning I get to come into my toll booth and dance. And I think, oh my gosh, what a great story. And this was written up, the gentleman wrote it up, and I read this little story. I thought I'm going to share this with others. How fun to have a young man who is cheerful and just exudes his happiness to others all day long. And so I thought I'd share that with you today. All right, the next one is to be passionate about something. How do you create your own happiness? Find something that you do that you love doing and learn how to monetize it, and then learn how to share it with the rest of the world, or as many people as you can. But be passionate about something. And if you think, well, Dr. Paula, I just am not passionate about my job, I say, well, find something that you are passionate about and look forward to doing that. It could be a hobby. It could be something that you do to help others, or it could turn into your job. But don't stop your job until what you're doing that you're passionate about is making as much money as you did with your job. And then you're able to release that and do what you're passionate about every day. I'm passionate about serving, loving, learning from, educating, elevating, and empowering 3.9 billion women. That's the number of women who are on the planet today. Sharing what I know and learning from them and serving them. And I do that in two ways, through Win-Win Women Network. And I love this network. And we're growing it so that any woman in any country at any time of the day or night can access a female expert on any topic in her language, that's coming soon, for free. I love what we're doing. And then Women's Global Alliance. This is a magnificent initiative of the nonprofit Prosperity and Peace Initiative is the name of the nonprofit, prosperityandpeace.org. And these are women who are in alliance, all the women in 100, not all the women, but women in 195 nations who we are helping connect and collaborate as they are working on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And these are the largest challenges on the planet. And these women are finding and implementing solutions for these biggest challenges like clean water, no poverty, gender equality. They're 17. And then we're helping connect them, collaborate, and then measuring the progress, which is a missing element to date. And that's exciting. And you're welcome to look at that, womensglobalalliance.org. Those two, plus, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention my great gratitude for and the joy they bring to my heart. In fact, my number one priority is my sweet family, beginning with my wonderful husband, who I met when we were 12. We've been married 53 years. I'm 75 right now. And we have 8 children and 26 grandchildren who live within 30 minutes of us. We're so blessed. And so I have many reasons, and yet you do also. Yours aren't mine. However, if you think, well, I just don't have that happy of a life, and I'd love to connect with you and have you ask me a question that I can answer on these shows. And that's what these episodes are, the show, the Dr. Paula Show. Ask me a question. I'll help you in any way that I can. All right, now we're going to talk about the 5th way to create your own joy and happiness, no matter what's happening around you, no matter who's trying to pull you down, no matter what chaos and conflict there is in the world. And that is to use positive to self-talk and healthy self-fulfilling prophecies. And I know you know this. This is, again, a loving reminder. But how many times have you heard people say, uh, I'm so stupid, or I'll never understand this computer. I can never remember names. How many times do you hear people talking negatively? My friends, and you know this, again, a reminder that every cell in your being is listening to your thoughts and your words. Yes, it's so true. And that fifth book that I wrote, Believe It, Become It, talks about what you believe you'll become. And that's a whole nother episode. But instead of those negative, you say, hey, this isn't what I'm best at, but every day I'm getting better and better. Mothers could say, I'm becoming more patient every day. And then you visualize being patient and you become patient as you work at it. Patience and loving and kind and giving positive reinforcement to those children. Yes, I love that. You just fill yourself with healthy, self-fulfilling prophecies like, I'm clever enough to figure this out. So many things that you can do, you could think and say to replace the negative. The next way to create your own happiness is to ignore your negative thoughts. The question isn't whether we're going to have negative thoughts. Of course, we're going to have them. The question is, what do you do with the ones that you have? What do you do with that negative thought? And I'd like to suggest that you release it. In fact, I was just thinking, there's this experiment that they said you have about 50,000 thoughts a day. I thought, how in the world did they do that? How did they count them? And I know they put these, electrodes on the head and do these different things that I don't understand. And then I thought, there's a thought, there's a thought. We have so many thoughts. What do we do with the negative ones? And I saw this done years ago, and I'd like to do it for you today. It's so much fun. So now I'm going to light this match, and you're going to imagine that the flame is your negative thought. Oh, it's a crooked match. Now I can let this negative thought hurt me, burn me, blister, or I could what? Yeah, I could blow it out. And so can you. When that negative thought comes in, you just label it. You say, oops, there it is again, or that's not like me, or, that was negative, that was critical, that was unkind. Say whatever it is. What was that negative thought? Label it. And then you've heard of this, replace it. If someone says something unkind to you, then you might think, oh, I'm thinking that she's not very kind, she's mean, she's, whatever you want to say that's negative and whatever comes to your mind. But then you think, if she knew me better, she never would have said that about me. You replace it. Or if you say, any negative thought, you just replace it to the positive. I know you know how to do this. I don't need to give you a lot of examples, but that's the trick. And then the third one is, if you are regretting any decision you made in the past that's negative, that didn't turn out well, your decision in hindsight, you think, oh my gosh, you never should have done that. And we all have that, right? Then you think, I made the best decision I could with what I knew back then, with the person I was back then, with the information I had back then. I have more information. I'm a different person than that, and I'll do better in the future. But you don't hang on and beat yourself up because of decisions that you made in the past. You can't change the past. But the past doesn't equal the future. I know you've heard this. So you take the best and you discard the rest. You take those life lessons and it helps you be a better person, and it helps you teach others. We all have examples of things that then become lessons that we can share with others to help them on their adventures. I like to say adventures instead of journeys. I have about 6 more minutes. I wanted to just do a couple more. The next one is to eliminate all your negative, and we talked about thoughts, but how about when you say things like, I'll never get through this, or if I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all. We say these things, and again, remember, every cell in your being is listening. And so you replace it again, but you just say things like, um, And I love the one. I'm getting better and better every day. And you just keep stepping forward. You don't beat yourself up. You release that negativity because you're not the person you were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You know, we have different opportunities, different choices, and hopefully, and because you're watching this, I know you are a person who cares about self-improvement, about self-mastery, about creating excellence. And excellence is not perfection. And nobody wakes up in the morning and says, oh, I just want a mediocre day. I want a mediocre life. No, we want a level of excellence mentally, physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually, financially, and in all our relationships. And this is what I've dedicated my life to, is creating books, articles, courses, and presentations to help us all, me and you, become our best selves, become our ideal selves. Yes, absolutely. And the last thing that I'd like to suggest that you can use to create your own happiness, no matter what's happening around you, is to stop asking yourself bad questions. Like, why does this always happen to me? You know, why don't they like me? Why can't I? And instead you ask good ones. What can I do to make myself feel happier right now? It's a great question. Anytime you're in a situation where you are, that's a little negative or negativity around you, you think, what could I do to help myself feel happier right now? And you infuse yourself, your wonderful self, with positive thoughts, and that will lift you right then in the moment. And I'd love to share this little story. So I was with he's now 31. He was, oh, I think he was 3 or 4 years old. His name is Benjamin. And Ben was with me. He was just a little boy. And we walked in, it was Christmas time. We walked into the post office and there was a very long line. Maybe you can relate to this. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do during this? You know, it's going to be 15, 20 minutes with this little boy, and I holding my packages in his hand. And I said, Ben, when we get up to the front, I want you, whichever one of these three people who are the post office people, you know, workers there, I'd like you to give them a compliment. So you look at them and you be thinking about what you'd like to say. So during the time that he's there, he's looking at them, trying to think of something good. Well, as it turned out, there were two women and one man, and the man was kind of a big burly man. He was not happy. And that was the one that we we got, and we stood there, and he says, how can I help you? And I said, Ben, what would you like to say to this gentleman? And he says, you got really cool dimples. And the man just went into a smile. And sure enough, he had these deep dimples. You've seen them. And I thought, what? How darling. I hadn't seen the dimples, but Ben had watched him long enough that he saw him at some point. He saw those dimples. And I bet when that man was on his way home, driving home, he could have been thinking, I kind of always liked my dimples. You see, what do you do with the time that you have when you can create your own happiness? These are all loving suggestions. Now, I'd like to end with this wonderful, oh, I've loved this for so long. And I've told you, or my last episode, this is only our second one. And I said that I'd always like to start with a quote and end with something, either a quote or a poem. And this was written by Linda Ellis. And just love it. You probably have heard it before. Maybe you have. Doesn't matter. It's a loving reminder. And it's called The Dash. Have you heard it? Oh, it's marvelous. She said, I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted the first came the date of birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most was the dash between the years. So mine would be 1949 dash, and then whatever date, you know, let's say 102. So, so what's yours? And the dash, you know, the dash between the years. For that dash represents all the time they spent on earth, and now only those who loved them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love, and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. There are things you'd like to change, for you never know how much time is left that still can be rearranged. To be less quick to anger, and to show appreciation more, and to love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy's being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you lived your dash? Thank you so much for watching. And anytime you'd like to reach out to me, just send a question to Paula at paulafellingham.com. May you be blessed in all you do, and I send you and leave with you my love.